Research has shown that students are twice as likely to succeed if they have a dedicated mentor. So twice as likely. So that's huge. And the mentor is the person that they provide that personal connection for the students that are learning virtually. And online learning, that's a new experience for students. Maybe not since the pandemic, but taking the online class is really a new experience for most students. And having that connection and support from the mentor is just crucial. They need to have that relationship.
I'm Nikki Herda, and this is Bright, Stories of Hope and Innovation in Michigan Classrooms, a podcast where we celebrate our state's educators and explore the future of learning. Bright is brought to you in part by MEMIC Insurance Company, insuring the educational community for more than 70 years. Teachers and school employees visit memic.com/quote to see how much you can save. In today's episode of Bright, I chat with Debbie Lynch, who is responsible for supporting mentors across the entire state, while they, in turn, provide guidance and encouragement to students at their school who are taking Michigan virtual online courses. Debbie shares stories from her many years as a mentor of online learners, explains why having a dedicated mentor makes students twice as likely to succeed in their online courses, and offers 3 tried and true tips for supporting online learners as a mentor. Well, Debbie, it's awesome to have you finally on the Bright podcast. I'm so happy to have you here.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Yay. So this season of Bright, we've been asking everybody to kick off each episode what the most interesting thing that they're doing professionally is right now. And I'm curious what yours will be, especially knowing that, spoiler, but you're retiring at the end of this summer.
So, the school year.
Mm-hmm. Yep, the school year. So what's going on that's interesting for you right now in light of that?
Well, it's pretty bittersweet because I love my job and I love Michigan Virtual and I really care about the people that I work with at the office and the mentors. So it's a bittersweet moment to step away from my duties, but I'm looking forward to the next chapter of my life of being a grandma and spending some time with my 87-year-old mother and just kind of doing whatever I want to do for the first time in my life. But I'm leaving behind a great position, so that part's hard. But I am looking forward to the next stage.
Well, we've been so lucky to have you as our mentor support person for so many years, and you've given what you said 40 years to education.
Yep,
40.
I have. I was a teacher for over 33 years, and then I came to Michigan Virtual. So it's almost 40 years to education totally.
Awesome. Another question I wanted to ask you before we dig in is just if you could tell me a moment that you vividly remember falling in love with education.
Wow. Well, my parents bought a set of school desks, like old school desks, and my dad made a huge chalkboard, like the size of our wall in our basement. Huge chalkboard. So my brother and sister and I would play school all the time downstairs, and I was always the teacher. And then I don't know that I really knew anybody growing up that were teachers that affected my life or anything, but since they bought us those desks and chalkboard, it just came natural, I guess, to me. And then when I went to school, I loved school. And as I'm going through school, I thought, I want to be a teacher. So that's what I wanted to be my whole life, was a teacher. I never looked back. I went to middle school, high school, college, became a teacher, and that's the only thing I've ever done before I came to Michigan Virtual. So it was ingrained in me from the beginning.
So today we're going to be talking about 3 tried and true tips for mentoring online learners. And before we dig into that, I just wanted to unpack, a few key terms there and why this is so important and why the role of mentors in online learning is so important. So first off, can you tell us what are mentors of online learners? What do they do and how are they different from online teachers?
Sure. The online mentor is the person that supports and guides the students. And they're very dedicated and hardworking people. It's a tough job to be a very good dedicated mentor. But the mentors basically are the liaison between the student and the parent and the online teacher. So they are an advocate for the student, but they are also the person that should teach the student to be an advocate for themselves. I always said it takes a village to raise a child, so the mentor alone can't do it. They need the parents, they need the online teacher to reach a higher success for those students. Mentors are not content experts. That's what our online teachers are. Our online teachers are the content experts. They're the teachers that will deliver the content to the students. The students will ask the online teacher questions about their course. The online teachers grade their assignments and give feedback. The mentor is really the person that is there to teach students to be self-directed learners, teach them time management skills, and motivate them to help keep them on pace so they'll be successful. So they're like their cheerleader in the background to, say, good job, keep going, or, oh, we're struggling, what can I help you do? Where the online teacher is the person that really is helping support them in their content.
Thank you. That's really helpful. I'm familiar with mentors by working at Michigan Virtual for so many years, but, I hadn't heard of that before I got here. So I just wanted to make sure if somebody, was new to that terminology, that they had a little bit of background. So this is another thing I learned when I came here. There's legislation in the state of Michigan that every online learner needs a mentor, correct?
That is correct.
Yeah. So can you tell us why that's so important? That every student has a mentor in addition to their online teacher?
Absolutely. So yes, 21F legislation states that students must be assigned a mentor. And just so you know, a mentor can be any professional employee of the school district. It does not have to be a teacher, a certified teacher, especially for Michigan virtual courses, because all of our courses have a certified, Michigan highly qualified certified teacher on the other end. So it could be a paraprofessional, could be a counselor, could be a teacher too. But research has shown that students are twice as likely to succeed if they have a dedicated mentor. Twice as likely. So that's huge. And the mentor is the person that they provide that personal connection for the students that are learning virtually. And online learning, that's a new experience for students. Maybe not since the pandemic, but taking an online class is really a new experience for most students. And having that connection and support from the mentor is just crucial. They need to have that relationship.
Yeah. What does it look like at its best? So like if somebody, our mentors often in the physical building with students, because, so I know some students are doing full-time online learning, but a lot of the students we serve, for example, go to a physical building and take most of their classes through their public school district and then take some classes online. So what does it look like from what you've experienced, when it's most successful for students? What type of mentoring there?
Well, definitely the most successful students are the ones that can come to a physical location in your building, such as a computer lab. When I was a mentor, they came to my computer lab because you have your eyes on the student, right? So if a student has problems, you're right there to help them, and you're there to guide them. You're there to see if they're on pace, and you're kind of on top of what's going on. When the students are virtual, whether it's 100% or just virtual, however much time they might be in the building but not come to your physical location to take their online class, those students, it's a little bit harder to monitor and motivate those students. So the students that do not come to a physical location really, really have to be self-directed and self-motivated, because they don't have someone all the time saying, hey, what are you doing? How are you doing? Are you on pace? Can I help you? What are you working on now? They don't have that person that the students that come to a physical place in the building have. So it just makes it a lot tougher. And when I was a mentor, my students that came to my class far exceeded my expectations and did really, really well compared to the students that did not come to my class. Most of them did not do very well when they were off on their own. Because sometimes high school kids are like, nobody's looking. They're probably not going to do a whole lot. So yeah, it just makes it really, really tough when they don't come to a physical location in the building.
Right. Just adds that kind of extra layer of like accountability and support
Absolutely.
and guidance and everything that, most of us excel under when we have goals that we're trying to achieve, and they're more self-paced, right?
Right. And it's not just high school kids, it's human nature, right? To procrastinate. And if nobody's pushing you, then you're probably not going to maybe work as hard as you probably should work. So it's just a human nature thing. So absolutely, accountability is one of the biggest pieces when it comes to motivating students and just holding them accountable and making sure that they're progressing as they should.
Thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate all this. I was wondering, so you were a mentor yourself, you've mentioned, before coming to Michigan Virtual as our outreach specialist for mentors. Can you just tell us a little bit about your journey in supporting online learners? So how did that get started for you, and how did it, lead you into the role that you're in today?
As I stated, I was a high school business and computer teacher. And one day my assistant principal said, "Do you mind going to this Michigan Virtual workshop?" And this was probably 20 years ago. I can't go. I have another meeting. And I was like, sure, I'll go. Like, I didn't really know a lot about Michigan Virtual. So went to this workshop, and I spoke with several Michigan Virtual teachers and other staff. And let me just tell you, I was just hooked from the get-go. I'm not kidding. I was like, I am going back to my school and I'm implementing these Michigan Virtual courses at my school. I just thought it was really cool. I just think it's funny that I just happened to stumble on this because my assistant principal couldn't go to a workshop, so I don't know how, that just changed my life, just that one little thing. So who knows if I would have stumbled on it later,
Yeah.
But so anyway, I came back and told everybody I could how this is cool. We need to use Michigan Virtual, and my principal was totally on board. So I ended up becoming the online learning coordinator at my school. So I was the person that enrolled students, and then I ended up mentoring students at the same time. So I did both roles. Eventually, we got bigger. So we had other people in our building that would mentor students, but I was like the main person that, that enrolled all the students and things. But as I said earlier, most of my students came to my lab, but I did have some that were 100% virtual. I had students that were hockey players. I had a figure skater that traveled all around the world. So, and they were, those kids I didn't have a lot of problems with, because being an athlete and the capacity that they were in, they knew they had to get things done, and they knew how to schedule themselves. But so then all of a sudden I decided that I would like to teach for Michigan Virtual. So I became a part-time teacher for Michigan Virtual, and I feel like that really made me a better mentor. I was able to see both sides of being a mentor and what it's like to be a teacher.
So what did you like about being an online teacher that's different than being a mentor for you? Like, how did they feel different, feel different parts of you, I guess,
Great question. So being a face-to-face teacher and an online teacher is different, but what people don't know that don't teach part-time, or that don't teach online, is that you really do make a connection with your students. And there's some students in my face-to-face class that I didn't have a connection with. It just, it's just the way it is. But I had students that would reach out to me, and I feel like they were more open with me because they didn't do it in front of my face. They would email me or send me a message, and I felt like they really opened up more because they didn't have to say it to my face. And I had students that were like, "Mrs. Lynch, will you come to my soccer game?" And I would write things down about what they were involved in school, and little things about them in the very beginning of the class when they would tell me that. So throughout the year, I'd write and go, "Hey, how's soccer going?" Or "How's football?" Or "Did you try out for the play?" And they were like, "You remembered?" And so you really can build relationships with people. I wouldn't have believed it unless I did it myself, to realize that you can build relationships with virtual students more than people think you can. So I really, really enjoyed that. I really enjoyed being able to have a different kind of connection with the kids than even in my face-to-face classroom.
I appreciate you sharing just so many different perspectives here on the process of online learning. I do think it's really amazing and serendipitous that really that one meeting that your assistant principal couldn't go to changed the scope of your professional career. I mean, you still might have ended up there, who knows? I mean, but
right?
It's still definitely, ignited something. All right, last question before we dive in. Can you tell us a story about a time that you witnessed a mentor have a profound impact on an online learner's life? So this could have been, when you were a mentor or just something you've seen along the way. But I'm just curious if you got any stories there that stand out to you.
Well, I think mentors make a profound impact on students and sometimes don't even know it. Maybe later they'll know, maybe not. You don't realize when you talk to students, and as a teacher, I'd have students come back and say, "Hey, Miss Lynch, I went home and told my parents what you said." And I thought, well, what'd I say? And so they really take to heart, even if they don't act like it, what you tell them. And I had this young lady, she was a social butterfly, my class. She just kind of went from table to table and chit-chatted with everyone. And she had a world language class she was taking online through Michigan Virtual, and she needed the class to graduate. And I tried my best to get that girl on track and to get her motivated. And I couldn't do it. And so finally one day I said, look, this is what I want you to do. I want you to go home. I want you to add up how many assignments you have left. Because I'm just telling you right now, as a high school kid, to look at all the assignments they have, especially if they're behind, it can be very overwhelming because they don't know how to break things into chunks. So I said, go home, write down how many assignments you have, divide it by how many days you have left of school. And I'm talking weekends too. And you come back tomorrow, you tell me how many assignments you have to do to get a passing grade or to, finish the course. So the next day I thought, oh, here, this is not going to be good. She's going to come back and be super upset. She comes skipping in my classroom. Miss Lynch, I only have to do 7 assignments a day to get caught up. And I thought to myself, you haven't done 1 a day, but you think you could do 7? Obviously I thought that to myself, and I was like, that's awesome. She goes, I can do this. And she went over and sat down. And I'm telling you, that girl, she almost finished that class and she did pretty well. And I think it's because, when you feel like you dig yourself a hole so big that you don't know that you can get out of it. Well, when she looked at all of those assignments, she probably thought, I can't. That's just too much. But something simple like just breaking it down into little chunks, all of a sudden she thought 7 a day. I don't think she understood that was 56 in a week. But yeah. It was very, very doable for her, and so I tell that story all the time because I thought that was something super simple. And it's kind of ironic because now Michigan Virtual, we just this past fall had an update to our student learning portal, and our mentors now have the capacity to do that for a student. They can put in a different start or end date. And it rearranges the pacing guide, and they can give it to the student and say, here you go, cross off what you've done and go from there. And this is what you have to do to finish the course. So it's kind of ironic that I've told that story so many times and now we have the capacity to do that. We didn't back then. So that's why I had her go home and manually do that. But one other story I do have for you, Nikki, is I had a student that and a lot of my students were very successful. So I know I'm talking about some of them that weren't, but I had a young man that it just wasn't his thing. And he just couldn't get himself motivated. And at the end of the year, he came to me, he had a real serious talk with me. He said, look, I know I was really difficult and I know that I procrastinated and I know I didn't do well in my online class. But he said, I know you think I'm just saying this, but I really think this was a turning point for me. I am not going to make the same mistake when I get to college. So I really am thankful for this experience, even though it didn't end well for me in high school. But I'm thankful for this experience because I know that I'm going to get to the next level where I'm paying a lot of money for my classes, and I am not going to let this happen at the next level. So wow. I was like, okay. So that made me feel good that at least he learned a lesson. And isn't that, really what it's all about?
Yeah, I mean, that is what it's all about. And I think both of those stories illustrate, I've heard somebody, and I know it was a mentor too, but use a metaphor of like I think it was like bamboo shoots, it's like you water the plant for like 5 years and maybe nothing happens and then they can just shoot up. And I think they were using that in relation to online learning and just saying, it can be really hard, it's really, self-organization, self-discipline, all of that time management skills to work on something that's self-paced, and there's not like, this deadline, holding you to a very strict schedule. But if you can get good at it, and it sounds like as a mentor you were really able to help students do that, then they really can learn some skills that are really critical for the rest of their lives. And I think those two stories illustrate that really well.
Absolutely. And any students that are going on to college, it's helpful for them because a lot of the teachers at school use some type of program or platform where they have to go maybe get their assignments or get their lecture notes or communicate with the teachers online. And the problem is high school students think technology is entertainment. So it's a little harder when kids sit down to do an actual class, because all of a sudden they're like, I used to have kids say, whoa, I have to like read and do quizzes and take tests and stuff. And I'm like, yeah, it's kind of like school. That's what it is. We're not here to play or do social media. And I think that's a big adjustment for high school kids. But if they can get those skills in high school, then when they move on to whatever it is, I think it's going to be a really huge help for them to go, okay, I've done this. Like, I get it. I know how to communicate with people. I know what I'm supposed to do. It's not foreign to them at a higher level where it could be a lot more impactful to them in a negative way than in high school.
I'm Nikki Herda, and you're listening to Bright, stories of hope and innovation in Michigan classrooms. Bright is brought to you in part by MEMIC Insurance Company, insuring the educational community for more than 70 years. Teachers and school employees visit memic.com/quote to see how much you can save. Today, I'm chatting with Debbie Lynch, the Outreach Support Specialist for Mentors at Michigan Virtual. You can find a plethora of free resources on mentoring online students at michiganvirtual.org/mentors. Here, you'll see Debbie's mentor checklist, a free research-based guide, webinars, blog posts, and if you scroll to the bottom of the page, some helpful templates for communicating with students, parents, and online teachers. Up next, we dive into Debbie's top 3 tips for mentoring online learners. And so now as we turn into the second half of our conversation, I'd just like to invite you to give us your 3 strategies. So 3 strategies, 3 tried and true tips for mentoring online students. Would you like to start us off with number 1?
My first tried and true tip for mentoring online learners is building relationships. And I have that at number 1 because I think it is the most important tip of all, is building relationships with your students. And you need to be available for your students. You need to establish a rapport with your students and show them that you care. Especially now with this pandemic, I feel like kids are all over the place with how they're feeling and what's going on in their lives. So letting them know that you care is just super important. But also be sympathetic, be encouraging, especially for those students that aren't doing well. They need your support. They don't need someone getting upset with them. You need to be flexible and patient with these students. And sometimes it's good to say to students, what do you need to be successful? What does that look like to you? Because sometimes they haven't even sat and really thought about that. But you need to really establish clear expectations in the beginning, like logging in every day. Read the information your teacher provides in the course. Read your emails. Use your pacing guide. The students need to be taught, and these expectations need to be laid out for the students so they understand. You just can't go, here's your computer, let me know if you need help. They would just sit there and they wouldn't know what to do. So you really need to lay out those expectations and try to guide them. And it always took my students at least a couple weeks before, all of a sudden I'd walk around and think, ooh, nobody's yelling at me, because it took them a couple weeks to kind of get in the groove. And figure out, oh, how do I do this discussion board again? Or how do I upload this assignment? And it just took them a while because it was new to them. And I was very patient. I probably did the same thing 50 times an hour to different kids. But after a couple weeks, they got in the groove and they figured it out. But honestly, Nikki, just having that positive, welcoming learning environment. And that's the way I was as a teacher. And that's the way I was as a mentor. I wanted students to come into my classroom, feel comfortable, feel welcomed, feel supported. And I just feel like when kids know you care about them, they'll pretty much do anything for you.
So when you were a mentor, were there any specific things that you would do like pretty early on? You gave a few examples there for sure. But to like build off that relationship on the right foot?
Yes, I would. In the very beginning, I would be up at the front and I would show them what a class looks like. I would walk them through the steps so they would feel comfortable. And then after I got the students started, I would meet with each student at least once a week. And I would sit down with them and look at their class and have a conversation about, okay, so are you looking at what your teachers are writing for feedback for your classes, or how are we doing on the discussion boards? And I'd have some maybe generic questions that I would ask the student, but just another piece is that accountability, right? That we've talked about, kind of keeps them accountable too, but they knew that they were going to sit down with me, as well as I'd walk around the room most every day. And I was available to them if they're like, oh, come here, come help me real quick. If I wasn't walking around, they may not think to raise their hand and ask me a question. So I did a lot of walking around, and then I would separately meet with each student also to, just to see if they had any questions. Because sometimes some kids are afraid to ask questions or reach out to their teacher, even their face-to-face teacher.
And forgive me if I'm wrong, but I thought you had mentioned, like, to me, before at some point, that sometimes during summers you do virtual mentoring. Is that right? Or did I make
Yes. Yes. I also ran the summer program. We started a summer program at Williamston we had students that maybe they failed a course and they wanted to get that course taken over the summer. So then they'd start the school year off fresh. They wouldn't have to take that Algebra 1A in first semester because there's probably something else they wanted to take or should take. So we had an option for that. We also had options for students to take courses so then they could take extra courses or advanced placement courses in the fall. So I'm going to get my civics and econ out of the way in the summer. So then that frees me up for a couple extra hours during the school year that I can take something else that I wouldn't ordinarily be able to take. So I did run that summer program, and I didn't see the kids, right? Because it's summer. Yeah. But I would,
like at your cottage or something.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
Yep. Yeah. That's exactly where I was. And I did it from afar, but I had a meeting before I went, before school was out, with all of the students, and I gave them my expectations and said, this is what I expect from you this summer. I'm available. I was available all the time. It didn't matter. I was available to them whenever they needed me. And then every Friday I'd send the students and their parents a grade sheet, because back then we didn't have, parents didn't have access to the students' grade book like they do now. So I would send a grade book, copy of the grade book to the students and the parents, and say, have a nice weekend. Some probably did and some probably didn't, depending on how they were doing. But it was a short summer, but the parents were very appreciative. And actually our superintendent's grandchild was taking a summer class, and that's when Michigan Virtual continued to explode, when the superintendent was like, oh, Debbie was huge in making sure my grandson passed this class. So she realized how important mentors really were by just watching what happened through the summer. And I didn't even realize she was watching. But so that really cemented our school district's commitment to, we need a person in a classroom. We don't want to give it to, I feel bad when it's the counselor or the principal or the assistant principal, because they already have a full plate. They don't have the time to really dedicate to an online learner that the student needs. So our school district made that commitment that it would be a person in the building in that same classroom. So I was thankful for that.
Oh, that's cool to hear. The superintendent's grandchild
Yep.
Pretty neat. So, yeah, I guess I was curious with that. The reason I asked about like the summer virtual learning is, maybe we could explore with each one of these, if it's relevant. Like, were there any ways that you would kind of adjust when you would, if somebody's in a fully virtual position and maybe they don't have an option, either the student selected to be fully virtual or, the school is set up as fully virtual. Any tips for building that relationship for tip 1 in an online environment if somebody is in that environment?
Well, actually, that kind of takes me to tip 2.
Perfect.
So that would be communication. So having that relationship with the student is even more important if they are virtual, especially 100% virtual. But that communication piece is really, really big. But honestly, we're back to accountability. They have to communicate with students at least once a week. At least once a week. And it doesn't have to be face-to-face. Yep. Mentors, mentors have to communicate with the students and actually the parents too, a lot more if the students are virtual. And it doesn't have to be a Zoom or Google Hangout or face-to-face. It can be through email, through texting, whatever the students are comfortable doing. So from the beginning, I'm like, no, you're going to do Zoom with me or you're going to Google Hangout. And then I realized that doesn't really matter. I just really need to reach that student. So if they're comfortable texting, then I'm comfortable texting. So they just need to communicate. The student needs to know that someone's checking on them, someone cares about them, and someone's going to hold them accountable for their learning. And that's really a huge, huge piece of, I don't care if the students are virtual or not. It's just more important to communicate with them at least weekly with students if they especially are virtual.
Yep. That makes a lot of sense to me. You mentioned at least one communication that you would regularly send, at least during the summer, that kind of grade report, like, hey, here's where you're at, and making sure the parent is involved. Any other kind of key communications that you would like pull into your routine as a mentor or that you recommend to mentors?
Well, what I did was on the first day of school, all kids would go from class to class and they would get a syllabus. And then they come to my class and it's like, oh, this is just my online class. And I thought, I'm going to change that. So I decided that I'm going to give my students a syllabus that come to my classroom for their online class. So they're all taking different classes, but the online piece is the same. So I gave them a syllabus. And at first they're like, seriously, a syllabus? And I'm like, yeah. So I wrote on there, this is what you can expect from me. This is what I'm going to do. This is what I expect from you. This is what you can expect from your teacher. And we went through the whole thing in the very beginning. And then I sent that paper home and I said, you need to read this with your parents and you need to sign it and your parents have to sign it, and they had to bring it back. So to me, that, you think the kids don't really understand about online learning. Well, parents understand even less. So that was really helpful for the parents. I had a lot of parents who said, I appreciate that because, my son didn't tell me anything and I have no idea what's going on. So they really appreciated having that, at least the syllabus, to get a little glimpse of what is my student going to be doing in your class every single day. So I think that was really a good piece. I don't know where you want to put it in building relationships or communication, but that was a big piece that. Yeah. It is. Mm-hmm. It is. And I tell mentors all the time, and it makes the kids realize this is a real class. You're not just coming to the computer room to hang out. This is a real class that you're coming to every single day. You just don't have a teacher staying in front of you. Your teacher's just on the other end of your laptop. Because that's the next thing, Nikki. If students aren't meeting the expectations, what are the consequences? There has to be some consequences somewhere.
It's a accountability piece.
Absolutely. So at Williamston, what we did is we had homework lab, we called it. So it was Monday through Thursday, and it was for an hour after school in the library, and someone manned the homework lab. And so I would meet with students every week. So say on Wednesdays, I met with students. So I meet with them on a Wednesday, and I start with the students that weren't doing very well, because if I ran out of time, the kids that were doing really well probably didn't really need to talk to me anyway. So I'd meet with them and we'd have that conversation about what's holding you back. What can I do to help? And I'd go through a list of, are you doing this? Are you doing this? Are you doing this? Are you reading the feedback? Are you logging in every day? Are you committing enough time to your course and so on? And then I'd give them till the next Wednesday, not necessarily to get caught up, but I need to see significant improvement by the next Wednesday. And I even heard a student in class say, dude, stop talking to me. Miss Lynch is going to meet with me on Wednesday. I got to get some work done. And I kind of chuckled to myself and I thought, okay, this is working. I didn't know that it was working that well. But I would tell this. Absolutely. So I told the students, so the next Wednesday, if you weren't where I wanted you to be, then they had to go to homework lab. And they had to go to homework lab until they got themselves back to where they should have been. So kids didn't want to go to homework lab after school. And so they, that really helped. Or I could, I'm going to talk to your football coach about this. And maybe you should miss practice one day and come in with Mrs. Lynch after school and work on your online class. They didn't want to do that either. They didn't want to miss football practice. So, and obviously I would call the parents too. I put in grades every Friday into my power school. And so the parents could see what the grade is all along, so I always communicate with the parents that way at least, but there has to be some kind of consequence or plan of action if the students aren't meeting expectations, because you can't let it go on too far or they will dig that hole that they can't ever get out of. And nobody wants that to happen.
And so that's like one of the kind of like blessings and curses, right, of online learning is that you have this, well, depending on the model, but that you have that self-paced nature where the student can work at their own pace. And for some students, like you said, the traveling athletes who really need that, that can really be huge. And for some students, it can still be huge. It can still teach them those skills like we were talking about earlier, but it also can provide, a challenge. And if you get too far behind, it can be difficult to catch up. So it's really helpful to hear some of those kind of accountability strategies that you used with your students. So,
and I talk to mentors about that all the time, Nikki, and I always say it's a blessing and a curse that kids can work at their own pace. So it's great for those kids that maybe they need to read over the assignment or watch the video more times before they can understand the content to be able to do an assignment. So, okay, you can have as much time as you want to do that. And maybe, at their own pace that I'm just going to knock out a few assignments on the weekend or however the kids want. Every student learns differently. So that's a blessing that they have that experience. It's also a curse because kids can work on it whenever they want. And sometimes in January, when you say, okay, last day is June 12th, kids go, June? Oh, heck, I got a lot of time. And they don't realize that, no, this course is paced out that you have to do work every single week, just like a face-to-face class. So you're going to wait till March to start. That's going to be tough to be able to finish your class. So I'm always saying that. But it really is more a blessing than it is a curse because we have kids, like I said, have different learning styles, different life circumstances. Michigan virtual classes have really been able to meet some of those kids at where they are. And they might not have been able to graduate without some of these courses or, not be able to come to school for whatever reason. So it really is a great supplemental to the school's curriculum. Can I say one more thing about communication?
Oh, please.
So I talked about communicating with the students, and obviously you need to communicate with the parents because the parents, you really, back to it takes a village to raise a child. You really need the parents on board, asking their student, where you're supposed to be, show me what you're doing, let me see your grade book. Michigan Virtual has a student learning portal that allows parents to see the student's pacing guide, which is really helpful. I tell parents, put it on the refrigerator so you know where the student should be. They also have access to their grade book so they can see exactly where the student is. So it really helps to have that parental support. Really, really helps to have someone at home doing the same thing the mentor is doing at school. And it also is important that the mentor communicates with the online instructor. And our online instructors, we don't know the kids as well as the mentors. Like as a mentor, I knew those kids' history. I knew their background. I knew where they came from. I know pretty much everything about them because I'll tell you if you don't already know. And so I knew if Susie was struggling because something happened in her family or, Johnny's been really, really sick, and that's why he hasn't been on. So the online teacher will reach out to the mentor to say, hey, I noticed that, so-and-so hasn't been online very much. Is everything okay? And so that's where the mentor can come in, or the mentor can reach out to the teacher first and say, oh, Johnny has mono, might be a little while. And so that liaison and that conversation between the mentor and the online instructor are really key. And it really helps the online instructor. They don't want to be badgering a kid to be like, why aren't you logging in if the kid's sick or if something's going on that they don't know about. So that communication with that online instructor from the mentor is really key also.
I feel like this is all a real testament to like the best practices for online learning, and I think like if someone is interested, if they're either starting as an online mentor themselves or, just supporting online learners really in general, I think a lot of these practices are applicable in any fashion.
Absolutely.
Even if you're a parent, for a fully virtual student or something, a lot of this would translate, I would imagine. Or, an administrator who's like trying to figure out like, what does it take for online students to be successful? Because we're starting to see those questions being asked, especially in the wake of the pandemic, because like you said, it was new to a lot of people. And we've been in this game for a while, in online learning for a while. So, but there is some things that you might not think of, that are really important. And so I really appreciate you sharing all these. Yeah. Do you find that you have to you mentioned, it takes students a little bit to get used to, you show them the system and show them how to do everything. Do you find that you have to do that with parents as well?
Yes, it does take a little bit of time. You just need to give the parents the tools and say, this is a pacing guide and this is what it means. The pacing guide breaks down the class into weekly chunks so your student can easily, I love crossing stuff off of a list. And so I always told my students, print the pacing guide out, cross everything off. It feels good to cross it off. And I tell the parents to do the same thing. And just to make them understand, okay, we're on week 3. Like I used to use remind.com. Love that program. And so I would have, remind for parents, and I'd have one for students. And even though the students were in my class, I would send out blasts to the parents and the students separately, say, it's week 3, look at your pacing guide, see where you're at. Every once in a while, the kids would be like, stop blowing my phone up. And I'm like, nope, that's what I do. And because it reminds them, especially the kids that I didn't see that were virtual, that really, really helped them a lot. And then parents could be like, oh, you're on week 3, let's go see where that is. And then that helped me at home, because they'd be like, thanks for letting my parents know where I was supposed to be. And it's like, you're welcome. Yeah. That's my job. Yeah. So yeah, you need to give the parents some tools in the beginning because they truly don't understand. Because a lot of these parents, they're 100% new to online learning. A lot of these parents haven't done any type of online learning, depending on their age, obviously, because it's relatively a new term, I guess I can say, to people in schools. So yeah, parents, they're sometimes a little bit easier than getting the kids on board because the parents are just monitoring. They're not actually doing the work. So, but it is really, really helpful. My last tip is about policies and procedures, and we have talked about some of these already, but I really think you really need to lay the groundwork in the beginning. And just like when I was a brand new teacher, I learned you spend that first 2 or 3 weeks and you teach the students how things are going to work in your classroom, the whole rest of the semester goes well. And this is no different. So you have to teach the kids, encourage them, like I said, to be self-directed, independent learners, and that they're responsible for their own work, that I'm not going to nag them every single day. Even though I used to tell them I was a cheerleader and a nag. Some days I'm like, rah, rah, you're doing great. And other times I'm like, what are you doing? You need to work. But by giving them a syllabus, by explaining the pacing guide, by helping them with time management, help them become an advocate for themselves, and having those stages of accountability to help students succeed. By having those policies and procedures, then the communication comes more natural. The building the relationships become more natural. So I really think that setting the tone there in the beginning and establishing those expectations early really makes a big difference with kids.
Okay, so we've got building relationships, communication, and policies and procedures.
Correct.
And you see those, you just explained well how those all work together towards like a kind of perfect union, as you said. And And that makes a lot of sense to me. Just how, setting the expectations and communicating them to the students and building the relationship so they have a personal investment and are willing to, go along with these policies and procedures, and have some accountability built in as well.
Absolutely. And I also tell mentors all the time, I created a mentor checklist, and I have one for Michigan virtual mentors and for vendor agnostic, because like you said, online learning is online learning. I don't care if you're using Michigan virtual or something else, it's still online learning. But I used to have teachers say, what do your kids do down there all day? Like, teachers in my own building thought I was just hanging out in a computer lab, at a free hour. And I encourage mentors to use that checklist or show their administration that checklist. If you want to be a good mentor, it's a front and back filled sheet of what you should be doing before school starts, in the beginning of school, in the middle of school, toward the end of the year. It's hard work to be a good, dedicated mentor. It really is. There's a lot of work. You're not just asking kids if they're on pace. There's a lot of behind the scenes that goes into it. And I've met with some amazing mentors throughout my time at Michigan Virtual, and the things that some people are doing are just unbelievable. What they're doing for kids, making videos for kids, and all the communication that they have with the kids, and the after school sessions they're having. And it's endless. And a lot of my resources that I have on that page, a lot of them are from some of these mentors that have reached out to me and said, hey, I send out this newsletter, or this is what I do for Count Day. And so I share it with people because it's amazing some of the things that they're doing. And I just think that great mentors empower students to make informed decisions, but also to understand the impact of their choices. Because not being face-to-face with a teacher, the kids will understand that if I choose not to put my heart and soul into this and work on this every day, I'm not going to get a very good grade. And that's kind of their first taste of you're going to have an impact for the choices that you make. And it could be a great impact if you make, great choices of, following the direction of your mentor.
You made me tear up there. So just the, passionate advocacy for, what the impact a great mentor can have. So that's amazing. Any last tips on mentoring that you want to share with us? Either sneaking in number 4 or elaborating on anything said before?
I just think as a teacher myself, I love high school kids. I do. And if I had to go do it all over again, I'd do the same thing again. I'd be a teacher again because I loved what I did. I loved my relationship with my students. And I just think that's the most important. Like I said earlier, I wanted the kids to come into my classroom and know that they're safe, they're supported, they're welcome. And kids were not allowed to be mean to each other in my class at all. They knew that it'd be like, oh, don't say that. Mrs. Lynch is going to go after you, because it's like I wanted everybody to feel like they had a seat at one of my tables, and, they were good for the hour, and it was a welcoming environment. And I think that's key. And I also think it's key to understand that even my brightest students struggle with online learning. Okay. It's not the students that struggle face to face necessarily. Some of those kids did better than some of my kids that were, getting all A's in school. So even the brightest kids, and you just really have to be patient and flexible and kind of meet them where they're at, and they'll get it. You don't have to do that all semester. They'll get it, but they just really need that maybe a little bit more hand holding and, in the beginning. But set those expectations. Let kids know that, hey, I'm here to help you. That's my job. I'm here to help you. I'm here to make you a better student. I'm here to help you succeed and do well. And everything else just takes care of itself. All your other policies and procedures take care of yourself. If you set the expectations in the beginning, let the kids know you do care about them. I had boundaries though. I wasn't their friend. Okay. I was their teacher, but they knew I cared about them. And so I feel like kids worked harder for me because they knew that I'm going to bat for them too. I cared about them and I'm going to bat for them. but these are what
Some
you
limits.
got to do for me.
Yep.
It's a two-way street. So I really think that by doing those things, everything else just falls into place. And honestly, you don't have to work quite as hard because things do fall into place. I used to have subs come in and be like, wow, your kids just came in and did what they were supposed to do. And I'm like, yeah, that's what I taught them to do. They don't sit there and wait for me. They know what to do when they come in the room. They know how to get started and get working. And, so that always made me feel good that I get sub reports like that. They weren't all good, but it's just nice to have that. But setting the tone and those expectations they're just super, super important.
Yeah. And again, just goes to show, when they can, it's really just like self-management, and time management and all these skills. They're very relatable, towards being an adult, really. And, you and I both work remotely, right? So
yes,
can understand that. Like, these are all skills in college and in life and that you need in order to, have your own agency and get things done, really. And so it's pretty neat to hear about high schoolers, like, just getting in and doing their work, without really being told because they knew the expectations. So very powerful testament.
Mm-hmm. Well, you asked me earlier how I knew I wanted to become a teacher or how I became a teacher. And I told you my little story about my school desk, but I had a math teacher in high school. His name was Mr. Beauchamp. And
anticipating my last question. Yeah.
Math was a really difficult subject for me, which is kind of funny because my son is a high school math teacher now. But math, it just didn't click in my brain. And this man would sit with me after class or after school, and he'd explain it 10 times if I needed it explained. He never made me feel like I was dumb or I didn't get it. I look back now, I didn't understand as much then, but I look back now and think, what a great teacher. He never made me feel like, seriously, I've explained it 10 times. How do you not get this? That's how I would have felt, but he never did. And he just had so much patience for me. And I didn't struggle in every class. It was just really math. Other than that, I was a good student. But I remember thinking to myself, I knew I wanted to be a teacher, right? I remember thinking to myself, I want to be just like him. I want to be a teacher like that helps those kids that struggle. I want to help every kid, but those kids that are struggling, I want to help that student feel good. And like I said earlier, I never let kids say, oh, it was a stupid question or make a comment like that. Like that never went on in my class because I don't want a kid to ever shut down or feel like they can't be comfortable asking a question. So I made that real clear right in the very beginning that wouldn't happen. But I just knew that after having him as a teacher that, I wanted to be
that feeling.
Yeah, I did. I just really wanted to be that teacher for those students that struggle. If they struggled in my class, they might not have struggled anywhere else, but if they struggled in my class, I wanted them to feel the way I did when I was in his math class.
Without a doubt, it's challenging work to support students who are learning in a self-paced online environment for the first time. But with leaders like Debbie forging our path forward, there's one thing we're certain of, it's that the future is bright. You can find a plethora of free resources on mentoring online learners at michiganvirtual.org/mentors. Here, you'll see Debbie's mentor checklist, a free research-based guide, webinars, blog posts, and the list goes on. If you scroll to the bottom of the page, you'll even see examples of many of the types of communication mentioned in our conversation today, including example syllabi, online learning contracts, parent information letters, progress check updates, two-way communication forms, and more. Do you know someone who's an inspiring Michigan educator who should be featured on our show? Send us an email at bright@michiganvirtual.org to let us know who they are and why we should interview them. Thank you for joining us for this episode of Bright, Stories of Hope and Innovation in Michigan Classrooms. This podcast is produced by Kirby Gaylord, is hosted by me, Nikki Herda, and is shaped by many of our passionate and talented colleagues. Big thanks to Krista Green, Christy Trombetta, Anna Boyer, Sarah Hill, and Brandon Batista for their contributions to this episode. Bright is brought to you in part by Mimic Insurance Company, ensuring the educational community for more than 70 years. Teachers and school employees Visit memic.com/quote to see how much you can save. The Bright Podcast is made possible by Michigan Virtual, a nonprofit organization that's leading, collaborating to build learning environments for tomorrow. Education is changing faster than ever. Discover new models and resources to move learning forward at your school at michiganvirtual.org.